All right, everybody, we might commence. I think we've got a fair few number of people here. So thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. My name's Elizabeth Richards and I'm the General Manager of Hawkesbury City Council. And can I please commence this evening's meeting by acknowledging traditional owners of the various lands that we're meeting on this evening, in particular the Darug people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I also extend that respect to any Aboriginal people here with us on the call this evening. I'd like to firstly recognise that that Council certainly understands that the last 5 months have been a very difficult time, and there's been a huge impact on your day-to-day lives as a result of the situation up there with the Upper Colo Bridge. I'd like to firstly introduce our team here tonight. So with us in conjunction with a number of council staff, I have Jeff Organ, Council's Director of Infrastructure, with Richard Baby and Chris Armott, also from our team at Council, and the consultants Oricon, who are from the engineering firm that Council has engaged to provide us with expert independent advice on our options to rebuild the Upper Colo River Bridge. Here with us this evening, can I please acknowledge the Mayor, Patrick Connolly, our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Lyons Bucket, Councillors Reynolds, Richards, Councillor Wheeler, Councillor Zampronio. I think I've caught everyone, and my apologies, councillors, if I've missed somebody there. And certainly would also like to acknowledge the member for Hawkesbury, Robin Preston, MP, who is also sent to be on the call this evening. In addition to, we've got a number of other staff in attendance, and I'm going to hand over to Jeff, who's going to perform more formal introductions of our consultants in a moment. Our objective this evening is to finish up at around 8, somewhere between 8 and 8:30, with about 40 minutes for our presentations, and then we want a healthy amount of time, I guess, for feedback and questions that the community may have. As we're using this evening's proceedings are being conducted on Zoom, we've set up a few house rules. If we can just flick the slide over. To make sure that this evening's meeting flows nice and smoothly. Can you please make sure that you're on mute while the presenters are speaking? We do have powers, but we don't like to use them. And I would ask that you hold all the questions until the end of for the Q&A session, as you may find that your question is answered through our presentation. What would be really helpful is that during the Q&A session, if you could raise your little online yellow hand to indicate if you'd like to ask a question. And I'd also ask that questions or comments be respectful in their tone and nature and confined to the topic at hand, as I'd really like to make sure that everybody who wants to ask a question or provide commentary this evening has the opportunity to do so. Please note also that we are recording this evening's meeting, and a copy will be placed on Council's website purely for the benefit of those that have been unable to attend this evening's meeting. So with those formalities out of the way, I'm going to pass over to Mr. Organ, and he's going to commence our presentation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. My name is Jeff Organ. I'm the Director of Infrastructure Services, and so I'm going to run through some slides tonight just to give, and as I said, the community online here obviously knows the site incredibly well and all of the issues, but we will run through some of those aspects of it so that we can actually give some detail as to how we see the replacement and the works proceeding. We'll have a presentation midway through, or after I've done a little brief introduction, from Tom Cheesby, who we've indicated from Oricon. We've engaged Oricon to do an independent review of various options for the bridge, so I won't take any of his thunder away, but I'll just lead through that. And at the end we'll have some recommendations and where we're going from here and the timelines of the various actions that we've got to do. So, as you all know, the project relates to the loss of the bridge in the March 2021 floods and the difficulties that's causing the community up there. We're certainly well aware of that. So we're going to go through basically the replacement bridge objectives and the scope and the options for those. And as I said, we'll go through some of the reports prepared, or the report prepared by Oricon, detailing comparison of those, and then we'll go through and look at the next steps. So from a, this is basically connectivity 101. We want to make sure that this bridge here improves access, supports the heavy vehicle movement necessary in the local area, and I'm very conscious of not saying this is going to open this up to highway style traffic. This is about making sure that the local community can get their farm vehicles and fire tankers and all those things across, and that and no more. But we've got to design that road and bridge to be able to do that. And also to make sure that the journeys that everybody is going on are reliable and safe at all times. And that's going to continue for many years. So our objective is to have longevity in that, and making sure that it's resilient to the somewhat harsh environment that exists up there in terms of flood and fire in the rural areas of the Hawkesbury, and particularly in Upper Colo. And we've also got to make sure for the overall community that we've got a cost-effective construction, and make sure that our future maintenance is readily done and is, as I said, cost-effective. So in terms of the scope of what we're looking at is replacing basically the existing waterway, maintain the existing waterway area under the bridge at least, design the structure for the frequent overtopping that occurs. That, as you certainly as demonstrated by the flooding, the pressures on a bridge structure are enormous and can take, particularly timber structure, a long way downstream. There's also those overtopping loads. And at the moment, that deck level on the old bridge is around about 5 metres. AHD basically equates to above sea level for all intents and purposes. And as you're aware, there's certainly significant potential for floods to go above that height, with the 1 in 100 year flood level around about 20 metres. So 15 metres of water over that bridge in a major flood. There is some potential to potentially raise that bridge up by around about 1 metre to provide some better flood immunity in smaller floods, but certainly not considering raising the bridge up to the 1 in 100 year level. Again, just the traffic loading, we want to design this bridge to the contemporary standards. It's currently got a 15-tonne load limit on it, and but we'd certainly remove those restrictions with a bridge that's designed to contemporary standards. But as I said before, we can still ensure that the vehicle or any other restrictions on the immediate road network are maintained to maintain the safe passage and the road capability. So just simply because we have a bridge that can withstand heavier loads doesn't mean that we're going to do that, make sure that or open up all the network to heavy vehicles. So really the two straightforward options are to replace this bridge in a timber or concrete structure, or reinforced concrete structure. And we did look at, following some discussion with council the other week, at steel options. They're not particularly viable, and I'll let Tom talk about that. As I said, we're going to try and match the bridge deck level to the existing heights, or with a slight increase. And the new bridge being similar, so a single lane bridge, but with a pedestrian pathway or area on the side. Existing bridge is around about 6 metres, with about 5.5 metres between the curbs. So we did commission this options report from Oricon, just looking at, and that was, again, looking at replacing timber or concrete, satisfying those load limits, and looking at all the life cycle cost issues, which go really to the heart of that longevity that I talked about earlier, and reliability. So the other aspect of this is obviously that there's been a fair bit of discussion about the heritage value of the site and the old bridge. As I said, it's had a number of gestations, so various elements of this structure have been replaced over the years due to flood damage, with it originally being built back in 1938, I think it was. So there's certainly been some damage done to it, and deterioration, and works have been carried out at various times. So very conscious of the setting of this bridge, and yeah, we certainly do understand there's some sympathy and for replacement in timber. But we need to look at this from an objective point of view and say what's going to give the community the best overall outcome. That's why we've engaged Oricon to do that independently. So with that, I'll hand over to Tom. I'll stop sharing for the moment and let Tom introduce himself and continue through.
Tom, you're on mute.
Yes, there we go.
There we go.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Councillors and community members of Hawkesbury local government area. It's my pleasure to present a summary of this report that we've put together. My name's Tom Sheesby. I represent Oricon, and let me just get this going. So we were commissioned by council to investigate a suitable option for reinstating the crossing over the river. Oricon is an engineering, design and advisory company. We operate across Australia and New Zealand and in parts of Asia. For many decades, we've provided services to Transport for New South Wales. I call them the Bridge Engineering Group, if you like. And they have a whole lot of timber bridges that they maintain and have looked after over many years. They have something like 1,000 timber bridges. Some of the bridges that we've had involvement in are the two pictures down below. Tharwa River Bridge over the Murrumbidgee, where the trusses were completely rebuilt, and then the Hampden Bridge down in Kangaroo Valley. Both those bridges are heritage listed. So with the huge inventory of timber bridges that Transport for New South Wales has, they have developed and documented design manuals, maintenance manuals, as well as typical standard drawings that they use when they reinstate, repair, or even build a new timber bridge. They have specifications for the type of timber. They have a record in what works best. And in that slide is a cover of one of the manuals that they've developed, as well as a standard drawing that they typically use. So for the timber options on the Colo River, we've relied on the tried and tested materials, standards, maintenance requirements, and life expectancy based on Transport for New South Wales experience. We visited the site on the 16th of July. And as you know, the damage is on those three northwestern spans that went missing in the March flood. So the crossing is, just to summarize the level of susceptibility, it's susceptible to flood damage, washaways. A feature of the crossing is that it's comparatively regularly overtopped, which is unusual for a timber bridge. It's also susceptible to fire damage, being in a well-vegetated area. Its support piles are in standing water, which is not recommended in the Australian Bridge Design Code, which is the latest version. And timber requires regular inspection maintenance as documented in Transport for New South Wales manuals. Transport for New South Wales, from their experience, have determined that timber bridges really have a useful life of between 20 to 30 years. So all of these features were taken into consideration in developing the options, or considering the options. There were two timber options considered. We called the one T1 and the other one T2. T1 is rectifying the existing bridge. In other words, merely reinstating those three missing spans together with the piers and substructures. And then T2 was a complete rebuild. there was a concrete option considered. We split that into two sections, but essentially they're both concrete options. I don't think I'll run through those points. We'll just move on. So in the options comparison, we've included a table that highlights or identifies 10 ranking points or constraints associated with each option, and we rated them with a number of between 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest score in terms of handling that constraint, and 5 being the more preferable rating against handling that the particular constraint under consideration. There's a degree of interpretation as to how you go and do the rating, but I think at the end of the day, you can change the numbers slightly, but the outcome we believe would not really change. So I'd like to just run through these particular constraints, and the first one is the inspection regime. So we rated concrete the best there, whereas the 2 timber options get a lower rating. Timber requires annual inspection with a more detailed inspection every 3 years. And then the concrete option, really, you don't need to go and inspect other than perhaps after a major flood event. But nevertheless, we've allowed for a 10-year cycle. When it comes to maintenance activities, once again, being guided by Transport for New South Wales manuals, in addition to the regular inspection, annual inspection, there's normally a minor bit of, hopefully a bit of minor maintenance work that needs to be undertaken, but then every 3 years, there's a bit more substantial work that's required, which is all documented in their inspection and maintenance manuals. The third constraint then is susceptibility to fire damage. Timber, of course, is just by its nature rates poorly, whereas a concrete would rate top marks. I think that's self-explanatory. Resilience to flood forces, we've rated concrete highest. The concrete options can be designed no matter what the level of flood is that crosses over the bridge, whereas timber is susceptible to flood damage. And of course, that's been proven with this recent March flood. Material availability, we approached in the pricing and consideration of timber a hardwood supplier who provides regular supplies to Transport for New South Wales, and there is a selection criteria that they have to go through, particularly selecting certain types of timber, and there's generally an 8 to 10 month delay in obtaining those timbers. And of course, concrete and the reinforcing is far more easily available. So we've rated the concrete option higher than the material availability criteria on timber. The design life, timber, once again, 20 to 30 year life, whereas concrete can be designed as a default option really for 100 years. So it scores top marks there as well. The design loading on concrete would be designed for taking the maximum load that's within the standards. But more importantly, that loading or load rating doesn't deteriorate over a period. It remains at whatever it was initially designed for, whereas timber does depreciate or diminish, which is borne out by the fact that that bridge at the moment, prior to its damage, was rated at, I think, 15 tons. So the design loading, concrete scores the highest, whereas the other two are much lower. The cost side of it, over 100-year design life, the least costly proves out to be the concrete. and that's the initial construction cost. And the reason for that is that the timber bridges in the cost comparison over a 100-year design life have to be replaced. And I'll touch on that with the last slide. The maintenance cost, timber should really be maintenance free over a 100-year design life, whereas the timber options both require maintenance. The T1 option, which is the reinstating of the bridge, would be the lowest rating because of the inherent defects that could be within that, the parts that are maintained, whereas the entirely new bridge in timber scores a little bit better, but still far lower than what it would for a concrete option. Constructability, we have those rated pretty much equally. Because reinforced concrete is more freely on the market, it's rated slightly better, but really that's not much of a difference there. And then the construction risks, pretty much of an equal risk there, although we think that the concrete's slightly better. So when you add them all up, the highest score there is by far the concrete option against the other two. And as I said, even if there's a degree of subjectivity in this, but even if you take that out and you change the numbers slightly, it's not going to be, the outcome is not going to be too different. So the recommendation is that while timber has been considered as a potential material for reinstating the crossing, the concrete replacements offer benefits that outweigh a timber bridge, be it reinstating or replacing the existing bridge. Reinstating the crossing is recommended to be undertaken by constructing a new concrete bridge. And the benefits are, it has a 100-year design life. It's less costly over a 100-year period. It has full resilience against flood damage and wash away events, no matter the magnitude of the flood. Its resilience and assurance of a secure crossing in the event of bushfire events, assuring egress, which is important, as well as access for firefighting vehicles. It's able to be crossed by vehicles of unrestricted loads over its design life. And the concrete option provides assurance of an operational crossing irrespective of natural disasters and consistent with state and federal programs to replace timber bridges. Contribution to consumption of price selected hardwood timber is also avoided. And I suppose we're into the question of sustainability. So if just looking very quickly at the cost, and the costing schedules is included in the report, but if you look at the right-hand column, the T1, the two timber options over 100 years, just taking pure cash flow would be those figures, 4.4 million over 100 years, whereas the concrete option is 1.7. If you adjust those figures to a present worth value using an inflation rate of 2% and interest rate of 4%, those numbers come down to 2.4 for the T1 option and 2.35 for the timber T2 option. And then the concrete is still pretty much the lower figure, being round about the figure of the initial capital cost. And that's all from me, Jeff.
Okay, thanks, Tom. So I guess that's probably the technical side of that. And I should also add that Oricon have not been engaged to do detailed design of either timber or concrete options. So they are basically independent of the process. So the next steps, or the next part of the presentation is really about, as I said, certainly aware that there's some desire for potentially for a timber bridge, and there's other values there. Probably just add to Tom's presentation that obviously timber bridges were, that was the material of choice and convenience for many bridges. As I said, there's still 1,000 timber bridges that Transport for New South Wales operates. Council also still retains a number of timber bridges, but over the last decade or so, we've certainly been replacing those as part of that Commonwealth-funded program to provide better resilience into the road network. So again, we've replaced, I think, 6 or 7 bridges in recent years from timber, which were failing, load limits on them, to something that's probably contemporary and the better solution. So we did pursue the issue of the timber option right from the early days, and I know a number of the people in the community were talking to a company called TRS, and we were also speaking to them as well. They're a well-recognised firm in timber construction for various structures. So we did have some discussions with them, and they gave some initial advice, and we did engage them. However, it hasn't progressed significantly at the moment, given their design arm people are based in Queensland, and they were unwilling to come across and get trapped this side of the border, I guess. So they did indicate, though, at the time of the initial engagement, that they would be somewhat delayed in any event of being able to undertake detailed design, and also that there was a delay in the procurement of materials potentially that would loom for a timber bridge option. That's consistent with the advice that Tom gave earlier there about the need, particularly with bridge girders themselves, to source those from and select them, source them, and basically allow them to cure and be appropriately treated for purpose. I think I did get a question the other week from council. It was somewhat related to bushfire, and yes, that has impacted on some of the availability of timber in some of both the state forests and the private forestry areas, and the ability to get some of those timbers that are in there. So people may have seen some of the options. So this is the company that we're talking with, TRS, and WRD is their design arm. So again, they're the contemporary solution or timber bridge structures for new or replacement, other than strict heritage renewal. And some of those bridges that Tom showed for Transport for New South Wales are quite distinct and quite unique. The TRS option is generally to use what we call engineered timbers, laminated beams, particularly for headstocks. Still relies upon timber piles, normal tree material for that, and also for the bridge girders themselves generally. Basically, what you're looking at in this image here is they actually use a glue lamb and giant plywood panels essentially as your bridge decking material, because again, it's an engineered product and you have some knowledge and ability to predict its behaviour under load. The normal process with that is that you don't actually see the timber bridge because a bitumen seal is applied over the top of that for waterproofing purposes, and because of the nature of those glue lamb panels. It is possible, of course, to build the bridge with in the same style as the existing bridge, with decking materials and running boards on those. But again, they're subjected, particularly in this case, to frequent inundation. And as I said, the enemy of any timber structure is water and the number of penetration holes that are within that material. So when you use bridge spikes and so on, or bolts, these are all the failure points, and that's why these bridges deteriorate. So that would be the appearance, and what you can see there, and it's probably a little bit unclear, but showing timber curbing along each side of that and a bitumen seal over the top. Another view of that, which is a little bit clearer. Another bridge that TRS have built using that methodology I talked about. So again, they've got a concrete ramp approach on this side here. And again, the timber curbs with scuppers to allow for drainage and the seal over the top. So that was where that's basically the point that got to. We can certainly continue that on, but there are some delays and I'll go through those at the end of the presentation in terms of timeframes, if that were to be the option selected. We did look at the reinforced concrete bridge option as in a fair bit of detail in parallel with the timber bridge option. And we do have preliminary designs in progress. And as I said, again, because it's also, the market there is well experienced in designing these structures. They're relatively simple engineering structures that can be designed fairly quickly. So the geotech investigations were undertaken, obviously down to what the bearing material is in the river itself appears. We looked at a range of options, and given maintaining waterway and the need to get slenderness in the superstructure itself, replacing it with a 5-span bridge. And we could also look at, again, preempting the appearance issue, looking at some of the non-structural elements in the bridge, such as the timber curbs, the curbs being constructed in timber, so that it gives you that similar appearance to what we looked at in that TRS image. Again, as Tom indicated, there'd be no load limit on the bridge itself in terms of structure, but it also is flood and fire resistant. And we might think that fire is a remote possibility on a bridge sitting in the water. However, I've been involved in a number of other ones where vandalism has been certainly a major issue with timber bridges, and people setting cars on fire in the middle of those. So I'm not sure that's going to occur out in this community, but it's a real risk and threat to some of these structures. We don't normally publicise that though. So just in plan view, and this would be kind of common to either, in terms of layout, to either a timber or concrete bridge. Typically 5 spans, we may need to go to 6 if you're looking at a timber bridge option, and depending on the availability of timber girder material, the shorter spans. Again, then in a cross section, this is not shown, taking the piers all the way down to the bedrock in the river. So we understand from the geotech and also the original design plans for the timber bridge that bedrock's around about 20 metres down below the normal bed level of the river, which is also an issue in terms of procuring suitable bridge piles in timber. They would invariably, if you're looking at turpentine, the availability, it's very difficult to get engineered quality piling 20 metres long or 25 metres long, and they would need to be probably joined as they're driven. So again, another weak point in that. And I sound like I'm probably talking down the timber option, but I make no apology for that when we get to the end. Just another section of how that might work with timber curbs to give that visible appearance of something that's a little bit more in keeping with the environment out there. There's just schematic only. So again, you'd see we'd have the 3 timber curbs across the deck. And they would need to be probably segmented, or if you remember back in the TRS image, with some openings within those, we'd need to work that detail out. And again, just the configuration of how a concrete bridge works. Again, we've got the curb, the cast in situ deck level, pre-stressed beams below that, then what we call the headstock, which distributes the loads from those beams. They go into the columns, and the loads from those columns are transferred down into the pile cap and down into the piers that are driven into the river. So again, these would be, regardless of whether they were timber or concrete, they would be driven piles, not bored, and driven down to refusal at bedrock level. Little bit, we're not the greatest of artists, us engineers, so just to give some sort of scale of the bridge, looking downstream, our little yellow four-wheel drive sitting on the top. That's kind of the scale of what the appearance of a concrete bridge would look like. So it's relatively slender, with those number of piers in the river. Again, just a mock-up. Certainly, this is a shorter bridge, and we've put shown the timber curbs on those. We've only shown 2 here just for clarity, so you can see that. Again, with a concrete deck, we wouldn't put an asphalt seal over that concrete deck. We normally leave those exposed. It doesn't preclude a seal over into the future if there's deterioration of the immediate concrete surface. So again, the visible area would be with the timber curbs. As I've indicated, we know there's a certain level of community sentiment to retain or replace the bridge in timber. It's certainly not our recommendation that would be the desirable thing to do. Certainly not the T1 option. Nobody can guarantee what the condition of those piles are below the water. If we were to retain that structure, they would need to be either replaced. So certainly the option of reinstating or repairing the existing bridge. I don't think it'd be very difficult to find somebody who would certify that. As I said, the issue out here too is also that this is a bridge that at this level, as a low-level structure, is certainly inundated and subject to significant flood forces, but also the damage that occurs from debris loading, and also the being underwater for a certain period of time is not good for timber in that area. We think there's a number of options to achieve a higher level of aesthetic quality, as I said, using timber and elements and minimising the depth of the superstructure, and potentially some neat engineering solutions to make those headstocks appear a little bit more slender than from the outside appearance looking upstream or downstream. The next steps in this, I guess, is, and this is kind of a timeline to just indicate the other aspect of this, which is the constructability and the time to get this going. If we're looking at a concrete bridge option, we believe that the design can be finalised in the next 6 to 8 weeks, and taking us up to around the end of October. In parallel with that, we would undertake what we need to do is the planning approvals. That'd be the review of environmental factors. So when you're doing anything, particularly in a waterway, we've got to go make sure that all of those environmental issues are ticked off and managed. That's part of the course of doing these things. So fisheries, we've got Aboriginal European heritage, threatened species, all sorts, and other regulations that apply to this. In parallel with that, but probably concluding in early November, we would prepare the tender documentation based on that design and any requirements from the environmental studies, and put that out to tender in either December. Probably, ideally, we'd be trying to aim for late November, but December, January, going to tender, and then awarding in February, late February or March. That would enable construction period of around 6 months. So it'll take us up into the early third quarter of 2022. So around the July, August period for construction of the concrete bridge option. Excuse me. Basically, in the comparison of those timelines for the timber bridge. So as it indicated, just using, if we were to use TRS, it's unlikely that we'll complete that design in the current calendar year, simply because of the delays in access likely to be able to get across from Queensland. Obviously, there are other companies that can do timber design, and Oricon could certainly do that, I guess, or any other firm. However, there's the key thing is all of those other aspects concrete is a far easier design option, as said, with well-known methods and practices in place. It's relatively easy to get that done compared to a timber design. Having regard for those timeframes, we would not be likely to get out to tender until the May, early June of next year, based on that. That also includes, as I said, the potential delays in timber supply. Again, that would affect the design. There may be that we can look at different alternatives in timber. I'm not certainly ruling out and making the supply issue of the timber critical, but as I said, it's probably, even if we started today and knew exactly what it was that you wanted, you're looking at 8 to 9 months, which is still taking us up to supply of timber in the April of next year period before you would even start construction. So again, there's probably at least a 3 to 4 month, being really optimistic with the timber option, delay compared to getting a concrete bridge underway. So I said, I've got to be really blunt and honest. I said, the existing timber bridge really should be replaced with a concrete bridge. This is the one thing that's going to give the community, the reliability, the longevity, and the broader community, the cost saving that comes with having a properly engineered structure out there that's not subject to the vagaries of flood and other damage. I'm certainly happy to make the report, more detailed report that's been prepared for council by Aurecon available, and certainly have the community make comment on that or ask any questions on that through an engagement process. I think the other thing too that's come up is that there's obviously, we can actually salvage the timbers. Normally when a timber bridge is removed, the last thing anybody thinks of is what you do with the old bridge timbers that maybe repurposed, remilled and put to some other use. So we think there's some options there, and we'd be looking at having those materials salvaged and going through a process where they might be able to be reused in the immediate area there, potentially in the small car parking area on the other side of the river on Colo Heights Road. As I said, I think we can also, in the concrete design, explore some options to maintain some degree of aesthetic qualities in there, and make sure it's in keeping with its setting. Again, that can be, as the timber curbing, maybe some timber elements or fencing on the approaches, or how we actually shape the bridge itself. And the next step, I guess, is, as I said, happy that we'd be looking at going to some form of putting that report out, enable some comment, but time is probably the essence, I guess. And I'd like to report this matter to council and have a final decision made within the next month on proceeding to the detailed design option, so that we can get underway and get this bridge built. As I said, in terms of funding, the funding is available. We've been through Transport for New South Wales, who are basically manage the disaster funding pot of money for road projects such as this. So they've also been on board, and we just need to get the design, get the detailed costing to them, and get that approved so that we can actually then go to contract. So up to the question and answer part of the night.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Tom. I could see that the federal member for Macquarie, Susan Templeman, joined us, but has messaged us to say that she's had to slip into Parliament. So hopefully we'll be hearing from Susan later on this evening. So we have entered into I guess the Q&A session. I'm conscious that was quite a technical presentation, and I assume there will be a number of queries. Again, in order just to manage proceedings this evening, if I can get you to use the raised hand function. For those of you that are operating on a laptop or PC, you click on the little smiley face reactions, and then there's the raised hand button there. So without further ado, Martin Walsh, you've raised your little yellow hand, so I'll start with you. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. I have a question for Jeff. No matter what option is adopted, there's a large section, 4 kilometres of Upper Colo Road, that is scheduled to be sealed. Of the about 12 kilometres, there's about 4 kilometres unsealed, scheduled to be sealed in the next year or so. I think the council should look at sealing that before the onslaught of heavy vehicles start coming up to repair the bridge or to replace the bridge. So it's just something I'd like the council to consider. It's probably better to do it sooner rather than later, particularly given there's a window of probably 12 months before construction starts. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Certainly could have a look at that. Said it's a matter of the timing and so on. As whether we can reshuffle that the gravel road sealing program to look at that. Something we can certainly look at there, and as whether that improves that. So not huge quantities of heavy vehicles needed to build this. But as I said, I can understand any further damage to that road and the gravel road maintenance. So happy to take that on board.
Thanks, Jeff. Any further questions or comments, Martin?
No, nothing further from me.
No problems. Further comments or questions? Louise, you're just on mute, Louise. The saying of 2020-21.
You're still on mute, Louise.
She's still on mute. Maybe if our host can. There we go, Louise. We've got you. Yeah, we've got you. Thank you.
I just wanted to introduce myself. I am the granddaughter of John Duffy, who with Mr. Solomon built the bridge. I know I've had some discussion with a couple of people at council, and just on behalf of the family, we are saddened to see its demise, but we understand that it's certainly getting on in years. And in terms of the salvage timber, if possible, the family would love to be able to potentially obtain some of that. There are still 3 surviving children of John. His eldest daughter is 96, and she can remember going down with her father every day to witness and be shown the progress of the bridge. There are 7 grandchildren. There are at least 10 great-grandchildren, and I think we're about up to 5 great-great-grandchildren. I've spoken with my siblings and my cousins, and most of those are very keen, if possible, to be able to get a piece of the bridge in some way, shape or form, because it certainly holds a very special place in our family's hearts.
I certainly think we can accommodate that. I'm not sure depending how many more grandkids you're going to have, how many pieces and how large you want them. But
no, I mean, obviously my aunts and uncle are, well into their 80s and 90s. And they are sort of saddened by it with the memories that they have. But we would love to be able to have an opportunity, whether that's arriving with a truck or whatever is feasible, to be able to obtain some of those timbers and share them amongst the family to go with the legacy.
Yeah, look, I think it's something that we can certainly take on board. As I said, I'm saddened when the engineering structures of the past you get to the end of their life. So I think what I was touching on there potentially about how we might adaptively reuse some of those timbers. It might be something. I'm just thinking outside the square here, and maybe something to recognise your family and forebears' involvement in that. Might be a good ceremony where there might be some token, but you can see that it's out there still. And we can recognise the history of that bridge.
No, that would be wonderful. But we just sort of wanted to let you know that we are here, and we like to be sort of kept in the loop if we can. Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. Wonderful history and a lovely legacy that you and your family have got there.
Absolutely.
Deputy Mayor, Mary.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you for that presentation. I'm really keen to hear what the community has to say about the bridge. I wasn't going to comment on that, and I was just going to say to Louise, of course, what a wonderful legacy, and of course, knowing your family, I know the history of that. But no doubt you would have some wonderful photos and things like that, which could probably be sent into council to assist with any of that commemorative sort of tribute to the wonderful bridge that it was. So thank you for that. But I'm keen to hear what the community think of those options and what their questions are around that. So thank you for the presentation.
Thanks, Mary. So really interested to hear your thoughts and feedback, particularly from members of the community.
Oh, let's see. Reaction.
Terry, are you trying to put your hand up?
Yep, I am.
There you go.
So we're on, we're sort of a Waidongadingo, right up the Colo River there, since the late 70s. It's a terrific, wonderful place to be, and it's a terrific community. Just one thought. In the approaches to the bridge, concrete or not, looks like concrete's the go, but in the approaches to the bridge, is there an opportunity to create a sort of, not very elaborate, but at least a minimal reference to the history of the bridge, who designed it, you know, the family involved, at least one image, please, something like that, that can just help people maintain an historical memory of the area. So I just propose that as something to be thought about in the environs as you approach it on one side or another.
Yeah, I think I touched on that earlier in the presentation, certainly either in the car park on the northern side, I'll call it, that there's potential there. And as I said, yeah, some signage and so on that might tie in with Louise. She's got images and so on. Happy to go through all the natural history collection at the library, may have some sort of good images in that. But I think, yeah, we need to reference and give a nod and a wink to the history there. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Certainly would I guess, relish the opportunity almost to do a little interpretive piece down there, acknowledging the history of the structure thus far. I will just take this opportunity to jump in. Megan has provided a comment in the chat section, and she has said, as a long-term landowner in the area, I would support the choice of a concrete bridge replacement. Council's willingness to include the aesthetic use of timber is welcomed. The concrete bridges that Council has installed in recent years along the Upper Colo Road have greatly improved the resilience of the road in times of flood and fire, and this additional concrete bridge will further improve the local road network. So thank you very much for those comments, Megan. Kathleen, you've got your hand up. Kathleen Ward. But you are on mute.
No, hopefully not.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, it's Trevor Ward.
Trevor Ward.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, as the only permanent resident, to chuck a few comments around, we just want to know how quick you can do it, and will there be any rate rebates for the extra kilometres that I have to travel and my family every day to compensate the loss of a bridge?
So in terms of the answer to the first question, as I said, with the concrete bridge option, timelines we're looking at the moment, subject to acceptance of that and adoption by, or resolution by council, we'd be looking at having that bridge back in operation sometime around the middle of next year. So that's probably the most accurate time frame I can give you right at the moment. That's based on a realistic assessment of construction timeframes and approvals.
In the last, since the bridge was destroyed by the flood on the 25th, my family and I have approximately travelled an extra 7,500 kilometres.
Can appreciate and accept that. Yep.
Yeah. So rate rebate would go a long way with a permanent resident who have been here. I've been here all my life. I'm not worried about a tar on the road.
Yeah. I think we're certainly cognizant of the inconvenience that that the loss of the bridge has caused to residents, in particular, additional travel distances and time out of your daily lives that has been lost as a result of the inconvenience of this, Trevor. So certainly acknowledge that. In terms of a rate rebate, though, I'm not going to promise you anything on that front. That's very, very difficult, and councils and local governments heavily regulated on what we can and can't do on that. All I can promise you is that we're doing our darndest, and I know that potentially at times it feels like there's not a great deal of progress being made on the project, but that Jeff and Chris and Richard and their teams are working as hard as they possibly can to progress this as soon as we can for the community, I can assure you.
Thanks very much.
Further comments or questions, feedback in particular?
No. Sorry.
Can see Maria's provided comment again with concerns around the timeframes. All I can again is reiterate that we are moving as fast as we can on this project, and certainly acknowledge and understand the frustrations of residents. Alice. Did I lose Alice?
Hi there.
Oh, there you are.
Am I on?
Yes, you are. Thanks, Alice. We can hear you.
I, along with Trevor, travel considerable distances all the time. My client lives just over the bridge, which is now a very, very long trip to get to see him. And I am very keen for that family, who is a permanent resident over there, to have better access out of the valley. They are just desperate, I mean, as everybody is at the moment, to have better communication with the outside world. Concrete bridge with wooden surrounds, and definitely utilising the wood from the existing bridge is going to be the best option. It's great to see that council has presented different options, and speed at which this needs to be done is critical, especially because, you know, farmers are needing family from both sides of the river. Cattle are needing to be taken to market. My elderly neighbour down the road is by herself, and she has cattle on both sides of the river, and the trip for her is grueling. So I think that as long as there's no, we need to get a design for the concrete bridge through as soon as possible and get it made.
Thanks, Alice. Appreciate that feedback, and I think we agree with you.
Just before we go on then, Liz, I might just take the opportunity just to say thank you to everyone tonight. I think it's really good that we can have, I know this is a really contentious issue and there's lots of opinions, and I think it's really good that we're able to come and have this conversation, get the input, and it seems to have some broad agreement on the way forward. And yeah, we definitely hear you that it just needs to happen ASAP. So I just thank you everyone for participating tonight, and we really appreciate your feedback.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay. Looks like we might be done if there's no more further commentary or questions that we can answer for you. I should say, if you go out of this session and you think that there is something that you've thought of, or you've got any other further questions, myself and the team at Hawkesbury Council are more than happy to take those questions at any time of any time of the day or night. Robin, I can see you.
Thanks, Liz. Look, can I just do a short straw poll and get a show of hands for those that support a concrete bridge as my first question, please? Just would like to know those in the room, the locals, for example. If you could raise your hand, and Liz, could you let me know, because you can see the full screen there?
Yeah, I can't see everybody's faces though, only those ones that are on camera, but I can see.
And those that aren't on camera, perhaps they could raise their yellow hand, and I'll take mine off so that I don't confuse the count.
Okay.
So this is for the concrete bridge.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Just the locals rather than all of us, if I can.
Yeah. It's like we've got, I can see at least 9 or 10 virtual hands up there, plus a couple of real life hands, Robin.
There's another one that's come up with, is it Megan?
Yeah, I've got Megan.
Yep. As opposed to, can I ask you to raise your hand for a timber bridge, just to be clear, just the residents, please? Thank you.
Looks fairly clear, Robin. We've only seemed to have 1 or 2 in support of the timber option at this point.
That's good to get an understanding of what our people want rather than the police. So thank you for indulging me. I appreciate that, Liz.
No problem at all. Now, Matt, you've got a hand up. Was that a vote? Or have you got a question or some further commentary? Matt DeBellin? No, gone. No problems. Mary?
Thanks, Liz. I just wanted to draw attention to Amy Ward's comment about if the bridge won't be complete for summer, will the reserve remain closed and Colo Heights Road for residents only? Which is probably something that everyone wants to know.
So we can probably answer that. So at this stage, council's resolved to keep the reserve closed whilst the bridge is not operational or not available. So council's already taken that decision.
Great question. Thanks, Amy. Thank you, Mary, for bringing that to my attention. Okay, so in terms of next steps then, look, the staff and I think the council are really keen to crack on with this as soon as we possibly can. So Jeff will be preparing a report up to a council meeting within the next few weeks, really just to formalise council's position on the option that we're going with, which we've clearly articulated that it's the view of staff that we should be proceeding with the concrete bridge and just getting on with it. So that'll be our next steps, and in the intervening period, as I said, if you've got any questions, feel free to send those through to council, and we'll keep our regular communications going with you certainly over the next few weeks, and then we'll keep in regular contact with you as the project progresses. But rest assured, we're well aware of the frustrations and the inconvenience that this situation is causing out there every single day, and we're here to sort of rectify that as quickly as we possibly can. So thank you everyone very much for your participation this evening. I really appreciate you taking out your time to help steer us in the right direction, and that's what we really wanted out of this evening. So with that, I'll thank you very much, and I wish you good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.